Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Laurelbrook Talks. So today we are with
Abigail.
And I'm Daniel Perrin. I've been with the Laurelbrook students all week long for a week of prayer, and it's been great.
And I'm Daniel too.
And I'm Marissia. So today we're diving into a real life issue that affects students, adults, and everyone in between: peer pressure. So my opening question is, how can you define peer pressure? Or in your own words, what do you define peer pressure as?
Well, who's going to go first? I'll tell you what. I'll go first here. Peer pressure. I look at what I find in the Bible and in the writings of Ellen White, and I narrow it down to one word. It's influence. Everybody has an influence on someone. Somebody looks to them and they say, "What's that person thinking or doing?" And then our actions or our thoughts influence somebody else, either for the good or for the bad.
When people act in a way that makes you feel inclined to do something. And yeah, it's usually in a very subtle way. Things that make you feel inclined to do something.
I think peer pressure would also include how reactive you are to other people's pressuring and influence, that how willing you are to give up your goals or morals to go with the crowd, I guess.
Those are really good definitions. Those are all definitions that I've heard before. Influence was actually the main one, and I was actually hoping someone would say it. Another question is what are common misconceptions that we find in today's world about peer pressure?
Well, peer pressure has a negative connotation to it, that peer pressure is a negative thing. But sometimes peer pressure can be very, very positive, because you can apply your influence. Somebody looks up to you, and your influence can lead somebody in a good direction. So, peer pressure can actually be very, very helpful. Someone has an inclination to do right, but they don't have enough strength to do it on their own, but they see somebody else do right, and that gives them the boost of strength. And that peer pressure turns out to be a very positive experience in their life, reinforcing the good rather than the bad, if it's used correctly.
Maybe when peer pressure is negative, a lot of times, if your friends are telling you should smoke or you should do these things, it's actual pressure. You're being almost forced into that more strongly. But if it's in a positive way, where your friends are all studying the Bible and they're all getting closer to God, and you see them doing that and you see their relationship with God, and you say, "Hey, I want to do this." They're praying for you and they're influencing you and saying, "Hey, you should do this," but they're never forcing you or threatening you in that way.
I really like that. A difference is one, you're being forced to do it, but one is just the influence. It's not really them saying "Oh, we're forcing you to come closer to God." I want to move a little more deeper. Why are we so affected by peer pressure today?
I think it's very human. It's of human nature to want to fit in a group, to want to belong to something or to a group. So if you get to a new place and you see that everybody's doing something, if you're not doing it, you don't feel like you belong to their group. You don't feel like you fit in.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is that God puts us in families and he puts us in communities because we're supposed to be able to encourage and strengthen each other. But what makes peer pressure so strong sometimes is that instead of attaching our desires to God and his will, because we can't see God with our eyes the way that we do with others, but we see other people and we so desire their approval, we want to be liked. We want there to be peace and we don't want conflict. And so we look at what others are doing and we want to fit in with them. And that's the negative kind of peer pressure, where we want to fit in with what others are doing rather than fitting in with God. There are some people who, though, they just say, I don't care what others do. I'm going to stand up for what's right, regardless of what other people do. And they seem to have this strong attachment to, I want to follow God's will, even if nobody else likes me for it.
I would say that we're putting our needs, like everyone else was saying also, we're putting our needs on people, on physical, on human things. And we're willing to give up our connection with God. And we might say, but I don't want to be connected with God because then God will take my friends away from me, because I like my friends and maybe they aren't the best for me, but I like my friends. So we're, again, willing to sacrifice and really desperate to fit in.
You know, that what you just said reminded me of that song, I have decided to follow Jesus. I think the second stanza, though none go with me, still I will follow. That's denying that peer pressure right there.
It's kind of like the narrow way, in the narrow way, there's few that take it. The peer pressure would lead us down the broad way that leads to destruction, but we're willing to go where few are following.
I know in the Bible we can find many different examples of this. And I think like my biggest theme of peer pressure I've seen, reading the Bible, is like idol worship or the worship of man. And I know we see like the story of Daniel and his friends. We know like Jesus' temptation, stuff like that. Like, do you guys have any like biblical examples of peer pressure? It can even be ones that I shared, but like that you think, that can be helpful, like an example.
Yeah, there's so many. You brought up Daniel, and Daniel chapter 3 with those 3 boys standing there, only 3 that said no. But they had a positive peer pressure among themselves. That one thing that I notice in the chapter of Daniel 3 is that their leader, or who seems like their leader, Daniel, wasn't there. So here's 3 young people who, even when their leader is gone, their teacher, their pastor, their parent, whoever it is who's been kind of encouraging them along the way, the leader is gone, but they still stand strong. They still stand firm. That would be like on, a couple of students here are out doing something. There's no teachers around, and yet you encourage each other in the place of, and you become the leaders to encourage each other. I like that story. Let me share one more. And this is not actually a story, but it's something that Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. He's actually quoting from another non-biblical source, and he says, bad company corrupts good habits. And it's not a story, but there's peer pressure. Bad company corrupts good habits. And you asked a minute ago, what are some misconceptions about peer pressure? And I think one of them is that peer pressure is something you just can't do anything about. Well, you can. You can choose your peers. You can choose the people that you're going to hang out with. And I look forward to hearing what other stories God's brought to your mind to see how that works in the Bible.
What I could think of, I thought of the Israelites and why God didn't want them to get mixed with other people, other multitudes. That's why in the book of Exodus and Joshua and whatnot, God was telling them to kill all of them unless they repented. Because if they were left alive and they by any chances joined them, their habits and the peer pressure they would impose on the Israelites could make them go into idol worshiping and other things like that.
Romans 12 verse 2, when it says, do not be conformed to the world. I really like those verses that talks about that too.
But be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
I think we find lots of instructions in Proverbs like that too, about being careful what kind of company you're hanging around with.
Oh, also the story of Job. I remember when Job was going through the trials and Satan was taking everything away. God allowed it to test him, and not because God wanted to test him. God already knew. But even when his friends were there and they had huge conversations, his friends would tell him, like, maybe it's because you did this. They were encouraging him to doubt God and Satan was using them to distract him. But even through that, he may have like questioned and been like, why? But he still trusted that God had the best for him. And even when his wife told him, curse God and die. Imagine if the person in your life who's like supposed to be your best friend, very close to you, encouraging you, like just like tells you like, curse God. Like, how's that going to feel? But Job had that strong relationship with God that he still trusted God even when his peers, his wife were distracting him and telling him, don't trust him. He still did.
You're touching on something really important, especially for people your age, as you're looking forward to the potential of getting married, possibly if God should lead someday. God tells us, do not be unequally yoked with non-believers. And it's in the context of business relationships, but that really applies to marriage as well. That relationship, that peer relationship, can be very destructive if we unite ourselves and link ourselves with somebody who does not share our faith in God and share our moral, inclinations and what we believe to be core values. So really being careful about that as you're moving forward in your life is important.
How do you think we can like identify if am I like pressuring someone? Is my influence good or is it bad? Like, is my peer pressure good or is it bad? How do you think you can realize this, like as like a self-examination?
That's a really good question. I think if we're honest with ourselves and we allow God to be honest with us and listen to him, we can look at our friendships and we can actually make a literal evaluation based on the things that happen. Do my friends appear to be growing closer to God when they spend time with me? Or is it the other way around? Are they rubbing off on me? In what way? Are we rubbing off on each other? Are we bringing them upward or downward? I think just honest evaluation. And maybe you go and ask your friends, like literally ask them, hey, am I a good influence on you? Is your life improving spiritually because of the things that I say? Be honest with me now and see what they say. You could also go and ask your teachers or ask another adult like a parent in your life. Say, you have wisdom beyond mine, so I want to know, tell me honestly, am I a positive influence? And see what your parents have to say. So I give you permission. Don't worry about hurting my feelings here. Tell me if I'm a good influence or a negative or a neutral influence. I want to know.
I think also with ourselves, you said we're examining ourselves, also checking on our relationship with God, seeing what our goals are in life and how we're acting, what our motives are for doing those things. Because even if you're acting like the perfect influence and you seem like you're doing the perfect thing, you could still be having a negative influence on someone because of your attitude or because of who your master is when you're doing those things. Because you can look perfect on the outside and still be a bad influence and under Satan.
What are like the forms of peer pressure like that we see in the everyday?
There's a variety of different kinds of peer pressure. And one of them is kind of a passive peer pressure, which is just the actions. Somebody acting and they appear to be successful in it. And then we see that and we see them having a good time. We see them joking and laughing and maybe earning money or whatever it might be. And there's that active kind, but then that's that passive peer pressure. But the active peer pressure is where I actually try to convince somebody. And I literally step in their way and I start to try to convince them to do what I'm doing. And there's a lot of reasons why people do that. Maybe they're lonely. Maybe they want somebody to affirm them in what they're doing. Maybe they want to feel less guilt and it feels less guilty if friends are doing it with me, or it's not as much fun unless we're able to share the time together. But some people are just passive influences and some are a very active influence.
Yeah, peer pressure and pure pressure. Yeah, because like I said in the first question, I think sometimes it is very subtle. Sometimes you're not even trying to do anything. You're just behaving like you normally do. But the person that's watching you, they feel inclined to do it because of those things you said. They might be earning money. They see that you're having fun. You're not doing it with either a good or a bad intention, but it is influencing somebody, even though you're not trying to do it. So
I think for me, that like I know I've seen a big one is social media. Like social media has one of the biggest impacts with peer pressure. Like, you know, everyone tries to like fit in. So like if this trend is trending, I want to do this. Like I want to be this. Like if this is the new style, oh, I feel like, you know, I have to wear this or else people are gonna think, you know, I'm like weird or something. But I guess it's all our choice to actually choose if we're gonna let this like take over our lives. I think Pastor, you said in one of your presentations that we open the doors to let like the devil get into our lives more, like by the things we watch and stuff like that. So I guess this is also like we can open the doors to let stuff influence us, and then we don't even realize that we're being peer pressured into doing all these things. And then it can be really bad. Like it can be really bad in helping changing your character. It can either be good or bad, but I think right now, in this time, I've seen more bad than good. And it's kind of sad, but yeah, it's true.
So what happens next is that when we allow Satan to influence us, not that we're peers, but he influences us, and then we become an influence on others. And so then Satan is working through us, and it seems very subtle because you're like, no, Satan's not influencing me. I'm just being influenced by a friend, but that friend is acting on behalf of of the influence that God has placed in their life. So this can be very a big deal. It's a spiritual battle that goes on. So I grew up without social media. I didn't have any of that kind of stuff. And I'm curious to know what your recommendations are, being people who've grown up in that realm of social media. Like me, I would just say, don't do it. Just stay out of it. But I remember what life was like before. What about you? Sometimes it feels like, you just can't get away from it. It's just part of life. Do you have any recommendations for people? And I'm not trying to take over the question here. I'm just curious to hear your perspective on social media. What should people do about it?
Sometimes I wish there wasn't social media because, like, if I'm spending time with my friends, then they get caught up on social media and I don't even get to talk to them. We'll be texting each other from across the room and I'm like, what is wrong with us? And so, I mean, yeah, I enjoy sharing hobbies. I enjoy seeing what other people are doing, but then also there's like this, you feel like you're kind of required to do it because all your friends are on there. You want to stay in contact with them. Want to be connected with all the apps and all the things, and they're like, oh, you should get this new app because then you'll be able to talk with us more or share this part of your life with us. And I'm still like struggling with it, I guess, and sometimes I wish it didn't exist, but definitely something to pray about a lot, and I'm still wondering what I should do about it.
yeah, I think these days social media influences people more than anything, more than any peer. There is social media influencing you. And you can choose your peers, It's easier to choose your peers than to choose what you see in social media.
One thing I've noticed here at Laurelbrook, by the way, I used to teach, as you know, at a different school, and I remember closer to my final years teaching there, which was just 4 or 5 years ago, there'd be groups of students and they would all have their heads down. Like, here they are, a little group of people, and they're all on their phones. And I'd ask them what they were doing, and sometimes they'd say, well, we're talking. And they were messaging or texting each other. But when I go around this school, everybody's talking to each other like real human beings because you don't have those phones with you, which is really neat.
I have a question. What if peer pressure comes from the people I care about? Like, it's kind of personal, but like, what if?
Well, sometimes, there are certain relationships that you can't end, but there are things you can do to limit influence. And one of those, of course, is our spiritual life with Christ, that he strengthens us to be able to be among negative influences. I think about Daniel, who was taken captive, and he actually earned a master's degree in the study of satanic magic. That's what they were studying there in that school. And he graduated from that program, and yet he stayed so close to Christ. He would not have chosen that on his own, but since he was placed there against his will. And sometimes we have those situations where you're placed in in temptation, or in a troubling relationship that you can't get out of. And you wouldn't. You don't want to escape from family necessarily, but sometimes family can be those influencers. And so we ask God to strengthen us to be able to bear or make it through those influences that we can't get rid of. We say no to everything we can, and then we plead with God for strength for the things that we can't change.
If they're that close to you, they should be respecting you. And we shouldn't be, I guess, maintaining very close friendships with those people who hurt us, who make us feel bad about ourselves, and who are changing us in ways that we don't want to be changed. And I don't know, I've struggled with this, that I should always pray and ask God to provide the opportunity, if possible, for me to spend time with other people so that I don't find myself in those situations, and also for me to be, instead of them always being the one influencing me because they have the stronger personality, stronger influence, and it is a lot easier for evil influence to happen, because just like it's easier for us to eat junk food than healthy food, that I can be, or the one who has a good influence can be the stronger force in that situation, that we don't get overpowered by Satan, that we can be influencing that person who's trying to influence us for bad, that we can be the one influencing them instead.
Well, in conclusion, I'm going to ask you guys to give a challenge to our viewers, just a challenge for this week about peer pressure. I can go first. My challenge is try to realize if you're peer pressuring someone, or are you peer pressuring them? As in, is your influence positive or negative?
I'm going to challenge you to change your peers, or add to your peers, a group that you know is never going to lead you astray, and that's the angels in heaven. That you ask God to station around you his angels to communicate. Now they're not physically seen to us usually, but to communicate to us thoughts that will lift us higher, so that we are closer to their company and less like the human company, which sometimes drags us downward.
My challenge would be, and it's also for myself, to maintain a positive attitude all the time, maintain a good influence, because sometimes I'll be a good influence, sometimes I'll be a bad influence, sometimes I'll have a good attitude and be happy and cheerful, sometimes I'll just be sad, and whenever I'm acting bad, then that gets to other people. But my challenge is to stay with God and to maintain a positive influence and positive peer pressure for others.
So I guess my challenge would be, notice if you are being peer pressured to do something bad. And if you are, take those steps that Pastor Daniel mentioned in order to get out of that. It'll be hard. It'll probably be hard, especially if it's someone you care about. But it really is important. And yeah, that's my challenge.
Okay, and I want you to remember, the choice to do nothing is still a choice. Pastor Daniel, as one of our guest speakers for this podcast, can you pray for us to close?
I'd love to. Dear Father in heaven, I thank you that your pressure is so gentle and loving, but it always lifts us upward. Lord, I ask that you help each one of us to have an influence that is sweet and heavenly, as Paul writes in Hebrews 10, that we may stir one another up to love and good works. Lord, lift us up into your presence so that we can be like Jesus. I pray in his name. Amen.